Just kind of like, just tapping that.
I get the most enjoyment out of forging something when I know where it's going, when I have an idea who it's for. I did a lot of jobs for paying customers over the years, and that was great. House jewelry, architectural ironwork mostly, working with Sy, designing and smithing beautiful things to go in beautiful houses. But there is a certain pressure and a real anxiety in a project like that, because you're really hoping that they like it, and that they pay you for it, and then that the check clears the bank. And once the deal is over, and it is always over eventually, it's really over, and usually with only a very fragile and fading connection to the project that you poured so much of yourself into, for money. So without question, my favorite things to make are gifts. Number one, you know that the person doesn't have any expectation, and that frees up your artistic license. You can go wherever you want to go with this project, and it provides a little cover for the mistakes that happen, and believe me, mistakes always happen. Number two, there is a very good chance, especially if it's a tool or some sort of a practical item, and if you did a good job on it, if it's well designed and well executed, that it's something they're going to have for a long time. Probably it will outlast them and you. Maybe their family will have it for a long time. It's not like I'm making them a cake or even, a hat or a pair of boots or something that will wear out. It's not like I'm building them a deck. A tool like this, a piece of hand-forged ironwork, will survive for generations. And I like that. Number three, if it turns out nice, and if you give it to the right person, it might be something they cherish. Almost all of my favorite tools and possessions were given to me by someone that meant a lot to me. And when I'm making these things, that means a lot to me. Now I'm making this axe for Adam Booth. He has the YouTube channel abomb79. He's someone that I don't know super duper well, but he's someone that I like. I really like him. I've met him in person twice. I've talked to him on the phone a few times. And I can tell you that he is a genuine, positive human being. He just has a great energy about him. On top of that, I really admire his skills as a machinist. And I appreciate that he comes from a family of machinists. You know, the thing about machining is, or seems to be, to me, that a machinist is controlling incredible power and doing work at incredibly tight tolerances. Measurements like plus or minus 1/1000th of an inch are not unheard of. Sometimes even smaller than that. Now, not all the time. You know, sometimes it's plus or minus 10 thousandths, or even maybe in the roughing in work 20 thousandths. But all of these things, for a carpenter blacksmith like me, are mighty intriguing and more than a little intimidating. Adam and I live on opposite sides of the country, like as far apart as you can get, pretty much. But we still have a few things in common. We both love old tools and craftsmanship, and we both spent our working lives using the tools and the skills to use them to feed our people. But even more interesting is that we both know what it's like to put content on YouTube, and have both had to learn a lot of brand new things over the last few years. It's comforting to meet another tradesman who's now dealing with cameras and computers and such almost as much as the more traditional shop tools that we have been familiar with for so long. Now, this isn't just a gift right out of thin air. When I met Adam, he mentioned that he had some big chips that he had been saving from a big lathe job that he had done years earlier. Big, fat, heavy 4140 chips. Now, I'm not an expert at canister Damascus, but as soon as he told me that he had those and he'd been saving them and he was thinking maybe a blacksmith could make something, I jumped at the opportunity to take a swing at it. Now, Adam also has already made something in his shop for us, something you will see later in great detail, but I'll mention now. It's a new handle for a Wilton vise that we have. That tool is coming up on deck for a facelift very soon, and we'll showcase that and that handle specifically as soon as it's ready. I sort of leapfrogged that project to get to this axe because I was so anxious to light up my forge and get some hammer time. And it gave me an opportunity to make an axe. And what blacksmith isn't just itching to do that?
So overall, now we've come to the end of this, and it's all etched and on the handle, and I'm pretty pleased. Now, I'm not quite perfectly pleased. I mean, there's always things that maybe you would do differently, but all in all, I'll take it. And the reason that I almost feel like crowing a little bit is this is the first axe I've ever made. First one with an axe eye. This is about 2.5 pounds, and it's the second piece of canister Damascus I've ever made. This is a first. This is a prototype I made last week, not knowing exactly how this was going to go, and so I made a tomahawk with the same recipe on the canister, on the ingredients. You blacksmiths have already figured this out, but a tomahawk is different than an axe. And I've made several tomahawks, although never one out of canister Damascus until this one. But this is the first one of these bad boys. Here's a tomahawk that I think Cy and I made a few years ago for my dad. I've made maybe 8 or 10 of these, you know, various shapes, different size tomahawk eyes, you know, with this kind of probably being the heaviest tomahawk I've made, but these are easier. A tomahawk is easier because it's easier to drive a mandrel for a tomahawk sort of eye through a block, a smaller block, than to drive an axe mandrel through a larger block and then have it line up. So anyway, you know, it turned out all right. I got a lot of coaching on this from Ford Swagger and Cy Swan. You've met Cy, you're gonna meet Ford. He's a Damascus steel master, and he gave me the 1095, and Adam Booth, A-Bomb 79, sent me the shavings, 4140. So I wasn't really sure how this was gonna heat treat. You know, it's kind of a Frankenstein mix. You got 1095 in the powder and 4140 in the chips, and I put some pieces of bandsaw in there, which has nickel, and so, you know, who knows? But it came up pretty hard, and it tempered back, I think, to a nice usable and edge-holding kind of a hardness. I wasn't entirely confident that I could make my first axe with a camera rolling. So I made the first canister and started into a tomahawk, familiar. But I was even hedging my bets there, because when I finally, after I made this guy and started in on this guy, I made 2 identical canisters, because if the first one was going to fail, at least I wouldn't have to rewind the tape all the way to the beginning to try it again. But we'll turn that into something else one of these days. So this is probably sort of a boy's axe size. I mean, here's a boy's axe. That's a boy's axe handle, boy's axe weight head. This is just about the same weight head. This is 2.5 pounds on exactly the same handle. So I'm going to call this an early pubescent boy's axe. It's bearded. Okay, now not many boys get beards, but this is a bearded boy's axe with kind of an elongated bit. I just guessed on how far the bit was going to get out there. I mean, I watched a bunch of YouTube. I watched Torborn Amon. That guy, he's so smooth, you know, and he made it a couple of really nice bearded axes, and he showed the measurements of his billet in metric, so I had to do those mental gymnastics, and then watched some of what Alex Steele does, and then I met, actually, at the same place that I met A-Bomb at the Good of the Land Festival last year, I met Liam Hoffman. Now that young man knows how to make axes, and he's not guessing. When he starts sizing his billet down and driving the fuller end to isolate the mass that he's going to turn into the bearded bit, he's not guessing at all. He knows what the dimensions are, and he knows what the axe is going to look like when he's done. So check out his channel. You may have already discovered Torborn, I hope. You've probably already discovered Alex Steele. He's a young magician, really knows his stuff. Well, you need to discover Liam Hoffman too. If I'm honest, and speaking of boys' axes, this boy's axe is about the only axe I use anymore. It'll go in the trunk of the car, it'll go behind the seat of the truck. It's not heavy. I mean, you can use it in overhead in one hand and 2 hands in all positions, and it'll still get some work done. Since I'm not logging anymore and not falling timber and driving in wedges, this would be too light for that. A boy's axe is a nice tool. And so I'm hoping that Adam gets a lot of good out of this. I'm hoping it goes in his camping box or behind the seat of his truck. So Adam made us a vise handle. It's gorgeous. He turned it on a lathe with some really cool tools that he had that were perfect.
Take a few easy cuts to get it down to, we're going to take it down to 7/16.
Out of a rough forging that I did here in the shop, out of a piece of a railroad coil spring, and you've got to get a look at this guy doing his work. So click the link that we've got up here, because it'll take you right into his shop, looking right over his shoulder down at the tool holder and the chunks flying off that thing, and the really nifty quarter radius cutter that he had. I don't know if he already had it or if he went out and got it. I hope he didn't buy it for that little thing, but he made us a vise handle that you're going to see go into an old Wilton vise pretty soon, and it's perfect. It's going to be the cherry on top. It's going to be the $50 saddle on the $30 horse is what it's going to be. The other thing that was a stretch for me on this, besides being my first axe and my first canister Damascus, was it was the first time I filmed anything by myself with one of our good cameras. It's been a long time since I filmed anything in the shop by myself. I mean, Nate's been right here, you know, getting the footage. But the videos that I used to do by myself, I'm thinking of a massive candle holder and I'm not sure what else, were done with a little, much simpler, much less suitable camera that Nate was just sure I had outgrown, and turned out he was right. But there's still a lot of parts on this, and I had to figure out just enough to be able to capture the footage. So overall, between getting acquainted with this camera, filming a process that I hadn't done before, making an axe to give to a very qualified guy out of a process that was new to me, and having to in fact make the tools to make the axe, there was a lot of learning going on for an old man.
The last thing I did before I'm ready to ship this axe is to take it by my friend Steve Harris's leather shop, saddle shop actually, to get a little sheath made, a little scabbard. Now Steve makes saddles and hackamores and all sorts of cowboy tack. High end, just as nice as you can buy. I love stopping by his shop for lots of reasons, but trust me when I tell you this, one of the main reasons is that it smells really good in here.
Note does, but I really like this company because you always get the same thing. They're super good to deal with. It's really good quality leather. This is an 8-ounce leather. It's thin, but I use it for a lot of things to keep the weight down, and it's dense enough and tight enough that there's places you can use it on a saddle. It's good for knife cases. It's a little light for axes, but it's good for today's.
Good for a light axe.
It's good for light axe, yeah.
Steve makes our blacksmith aprons that we sell on our website. Maybe one of these days we'll do a tour here so he can show you around. But he's another fellow that likes the old tools, the old methods, the old attention to detail, which is so easily lumped into the broad general category of craftsmanship. It's a word that's easy to throw around and is a little harder to find. It's fairly easy to recognize it when you find it, and I can tell you this, that in the same way you find craftsmanship in Adam Booth's machine shop, you find craftsmanship in Steve Harris's saddle shop. Thanks for watching, and keep up the good work.